Hello, everyone here on the Free Codecamp channel. My name is Anu Kubo and I will be your guide to the wonderful world of coding. This tutorial is for anyone who has never touched code before and would like to get started with the basics, such as where to even write code in the first place and how do we get text, images, and even tables and lists showing up on our web browsers. For this, we will focus on getting the right tools we need in order to get started, as well as a fundamentals course in the HTML language, or in non-code speak, the thing that gives structure to our websites and apps. This 2-hour course is actually the very beginning part of my full stack coding course, in which we go further and learn how to style things up using CSS, make our code actually do things using JavaScript, learn how to work with APIs, or in other words, plugins such as this cool map API right here in our travel app we built, learn how to work with databases as well as build our secure backends using Node.js and Express, and learn how to build apps that we can sign up, log in, and log out of while using popular front-end libraries such as React, so that we have a full and experienced resume that we write together in which we can showcase projects out of the 22 that we built. Okay, so what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. So before we get started with anything, let's talk about the tools we will be using in order to help us code. The most important tool we developers need is a way for us to write and edit code. We could technically write our code in a text editor like this, but luckily for us, technology has evolved and we can now write code in code editors that are built specifically to make our lives easier as developers by auto-indenting lines and adding color-coded helpers for readability. Some code editors even go a step further and give us prompts when they detect that we have made an error. This makes debugging code a heck of a lot easier. There are so many code editors out there. Some are hosted on your computer and some you can access online, meaning you don't have to download anything. You can just use it. It is also worth noting that a step up from a code editor is an IDE, or Integrated Development Environment. It essentially does the same as a text editor, a code editor, but also acts as a compiler all in one space, as well as a bunch of other stuff. This tool is a bit too robust for what we will be needing in this course, but it is worth knowing the difference between each of these tools. Today, hybrids of these tools exist, so it is much harder to fit a specific technology into one of these categories. There are many types of code editors out there. As mentioned, we have ones that we can download directly onto our computer and ones that are hosted online. For this course, I will be showing you how to use one that is downloaded onto your computer. I'm going to be using the code editor VS Code. I am doing this for no other reason than I had to choose one, but if you would like, you have all of these other code editors, IDEs, or hybrids of both to choose from. For those of you who would like to get coding straight away without downloading anything onto your computer, you also have the option of these online code editors. Please take a moment here to decide which choice is right for you. Okay, so by now we should have our preferred code editor of choice up and running. As mentioned in the previous section, I will be using VS Code on my Mac. This means I have downloaded it and it should look like this on your computer when it opens up. The next thing we need to decide is where our project is going to live. A website essentially consists of a bunch of files all organized together in a particular structure you design. Here we can see a project that holds my HTML file, another folder that holds my style sheets or CSS files, another folder that holds my JavaScript files, and a folder that holds my images. Don't worry if none of this makes sense. We will be building up our project called My Portfolio slowly throughout this course, starting with creating the folder in this section. If you are like me and have downloaded VS Code, you will have to store these files locally on your computer. You can store them wherever you like. Just make sure they are organized in the same way inside your project folder, which we have called My Dash Portfolio. On this occasion, I want to store the folder for My Dash Portfolio on my desktop so that we can see it visually too. If you have chosen to use an online code editor, you will not need to do this as your files will be hosted online along with your project. However, I would still strongly advise watching along so you know how to do this in the future. So on my desktop, I'm simply going to press Ctrl and left click on my screen and then create a new folder, okay? And rename it to My Dash Portfolio, just like so. Next, I'm going to open up VS Code that I just downloaded, so it should look like this, and I'm going to open up that folder I just created. So to do this, I'm going to just select Open Folder and navigate to my desktop where I will find the My Portfolio folder that I just created. I'm just simply going to click on it and open it up by pressing the blue Open button. And there we go. That is now looking good. You will notice how I am keeping the folder name in lowercase. This is because many computers, especially web servers, are case sensitive. This means that if you want to find a file in your project and you use a capital when none exists, it might not work. To be on the safe side, I recommend sticking to lowercase when naming all folders and image files in our project. This is also the case for having spaces in the names. Browsers, web servers, and programming languages do not handle spaces in the same way as each other, causing potential chaos. For example, if you use spaces in your file name, some systems may treat the file name as two file names. And some servers might even replace the areas in your file names, so the spaces, with %20 instead. It is for this reason that I would strongly suggest using a hyphen instead of a space when naming files and folders. Okay? And that's it. We have created our project folder. Next, let's learn a little bit about HTML so we can create our HTML file for our web page. Okay, everyone, and welcome to the first coding section of this course in which we will be learning about HTML. In this section, we are going to get started with the very basics of coding by looking at the language that essentially started it all for web development. Without it, we would not have the pretty pages that make up things such as this very platform you are currently viewing our course videos on. To understand a little bit more about how it all works, I will be starting off by giving you a brief overview of where HTML sits in context of a web page, as well as understand how it came about and move on to a tutorial with interactive questions and code examples in order to learn how to use it. The tutorial part of this section will take up the majority of this course. We will start off by learning what exactly HTML is, understanding where it came from, looking at HTML elements, understanding HTML syntax, or in other words, its structure, and then looking at HTML anatomy. Once we have grasped the basics of HTML and how to use it, we will be using everything we have learned by building out a project that we can be proud of. We are doing this as throughout this course, I will be giving you projects that you can choose to put in your developer portfolio. These projects will be ones that I have chosen in order to help you approach potential hiring managers in a bid to try get you your first developer job. Each of these projects will be appearing to you at various points in this course, so while skipping lessons is optional, I would strongly recommend you watch each lesson in order to fully build out your portfolio to its most wonderful action-packed self. Okay, so what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Before we get to any coding at all, let's actually understand what HTML is. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is considered to be a comparatively simple language that helps create the building blocks that make up web pages and apps we use today. We essentially use it to describe the structure of web pages. What I mean by this is that we use it on a document designed to be displayed in our web browser by adding annotations that will change what certain elements look like. Think of it in the way a teacher marks your work with a big fat red pen. They will make annotations on your text in order for you to change it. It might be to change something like spelling, or it might also be to make a heading larger or something bold. These annotations are not to be seen by the end, but are to be applied behind the scenes, if you will. Same goes for applying markup language in computer text processing. You are annotating a document that is syntactically different to the existing text. Now, whilst you cannot currently use HTML to change the spelling of things, you can use it to transform text into a heading or make it bold, as well as a bunch of other things. In fact, we can apply the hypertext markup language, or HTML, to this boring lump of text and make it look like an actual recipe we see online. So we can take this and make it look like this. So as you can see, we have taken the text, made certain text bold, made some text into headings, hyperlinked some text, and changed some text into a segregated paragraph. As we mentioned, we have done this thanks to annotating the document using hypertext markup language, or HTML. This markup looks like this. So here we can see the text, and here we can see the markup, or more specifically, the hypertext markup language we colloquially call HTML. Let's have a look at some of these in the next section. So, we have now seen what the hypertext markup language, or HTML, looks like in a real-life example. Let's break it down by looking at one of these elements first and understanding its syntax. Syntax is just a fancy word for the structure of statements in a computer language. And that is exactly what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the structure of HTML elements. In the next 4 minutes, I'm going to really deep dive into HTML, but don't worry, we're going to go through all of these sections video by video coming up next. Okay, so bear with me, this will be a lot. This right here is what makes the text in between it bold. It is referred to as an HTML element. Almost all HTML elements will have an opening tag and a closing tag like this one. We can also pair this with a paragraph element that will make the text below this appear to look more like a standard paragraph. When writing like this, so by using the angle brackets in this fashion with a slanty line or solidus to close the element, browsers know not to display these HTML tags but use them to interpret the content of the page. By mixing and matching these HTML elements, we are slowly starting to build out what looks more like a recipe page than a lump of text we originally saw. In fact, we can mix and match over 100 different types of HTML elements. Here are just some of the more popular ones to our disposal. Let's start by looking at the paragraph element. The syntax for the paragraph element looks like this. Let's talk through this in more detail. So first off, we have the opening tag. HTML elements are defined by tags, written using angle brackets as we touched on before. This opening tag tells our browser, hey, listen up, an HTML element is about to start. Next, we have the closing tag, which is just like the opening tag apart from this slanty line or solidus. This tells our browser that the HTML element is now finished. Any text after this tag should not be applied the paragraph styling. And then, of course, we have the content itself. This is the text I want to apply the paragraph styling to. It is in between the opening tag and the closing tag. Altogether, this is called a paragraph element. Ta-da! And, of course, we have other elements. An interesting one is the heading element. I say this as there are 6 of them. The H1 tag is the biggest heading, and the H6 tag is the smallest heading. you can use the tags as a main heading, for example, or a subheading. In the browser, the heading tags would look like this. So each number of text would have a certain size assigned to it. What is interesting about this is that giving text certain tags gives it semantic meaning to the browser, meaning that the browser will read the text with some kind of meaning. In this case, the H1 tag will be treated as the most important title on the page. I did also mention that most elements have an opening and closing tag. I say most as some elements do not need both. This applies to the image element, for example. We use image elements to embed images onto our pages. Image elements do this via a specific attribute, which is the source attribute, represented by this src right here that takes the path to our image file. I have also chosen to include the alternative attribute with a description of what my image is. I say this is a choice, but if you want to make your website accessible to all people, it is something I would strongly advise. This is because users who are visually impaired will be able to use tools to read out this alternative text to them. It also helps others know what the image is all about if the file fails to load, or if the path to your image file is broken. We will go into more detail about attributes and paths in the dedicated section on image elements further in this course. Now, we can also add comments to our code that will not be visible in the browser, but will be visible to us and other developers looking at our code. To add a comment that will not be visible in the browser, just like the tags, we need to put that text in between two things. In this case, it's the two bracket arrows right here, again, making sure that the syntax is identical to this example. Now, so far with these examples, if we just put them in a document, opened it in the browser, we would not be writing valid HTML. This is because we are yet to do a few things, which would include building up the anatomy of an HTML document. We will do so in the next section. In this course, you will see me saving files a lot by using a shortcut on VS Code. VS Code comes with many shortcuts that are available to you. Here are just a few of those. For now, I just want you to focus on using the saving shortcut, which is essentially the command button or control button depending on your laptop, plus the S button whilst on VS Code. Okay? So if you're unsure of if your file has been saved or not, you should see this white dot disappear. Once that happens, you know your file has been saved. We will be needing this file to be saved, as our next step will be to view the latest version of that file in the browser. So if we already have that page up, we would need to refresh the browser to see the latest version of it. Okay? So save the file using Command S, and then we will go to the browser and refresh the page that we are viewing in there. Save, refresh. Save, refresh. You got it! So keep this in mind, as we will be using this in the next section and pretty much all the lessons from now on until the end of the JavaScript module. Here is a basic file structure for when working with an HTML file. When we use HTML elements outside of the correct HTML structure, we're not writing valid HTML, even if the browser can fix our mistakes. The markup is only applied if the elements are in the correct environment. We will go into what that environment is in this section. It is important to note that for this course, we are going to be using the latest version of HTML, and that is HTML5 standard. Let's go ahead and recreate this HTML file in our code editors. So here I am on my code editor of choice. All I'm going to do is make sure I am in my project, which I have named My Portfolio. And I am simply going to add a new file like so. I'm going to choose to call it index. Next, by giving it the HTML extension, my code editor knows to treat this as an HTML file. You can add as many HTML files as you wish to your project, naming them whatever you want. Just make sure to put .html to tell your code editor to treat them as HTML files. Now that we have created our file, let's add some boilerplate code. So I'm just going to paste some in here and talk you through it. The first tag I want to show you is this right here. It is a tag that tells the browser that this is an HTML5 document. As mentioned, there are previous older versions of HTML, so just be aware of that on your journey as a web developer. The browser needs to know what version of HTML the document is in order to render it correctly. Next, we tell the browser where our HTML is starting. We are doing this as even though we only have HTML in here for now, we can actually write CSS and JavaScript in this document too, something that I will show you later down the line in this course. We are going to be using this HTML opening tag and closing tag as the root of our document. Everything else that we want to get picked up by the browser has to live inside of it. Next, we have the head tag. This is where we store information mainly. This is not to be confused with a heading tag. The head tag will store information that is not visible in the browser. It is for storing, not displaying. You will see that in my head tag, I have a meta tag with a charset attribute. The charset attribute specifies the character encoding for the HTML document. This is not too important for now. It simply says that we want to cover most of the characters and symbols in the world. So in other words, we can handle anything from Arabic to English to this funky little guy right here. There are other meta tags we can use also. But for now, let's keep it simple and just use the ones we most need. Next up, we have our title tag. This is for naming our project. We do this so we can store what we want to call what we are working on. And we store this in the head. So make sure it is in between the opening tag and the closing tag of our head. Once again, this is not a title we will see in the browser. However, if you look at the tab of the browser your project is in, you should be able to see it. It will also show up in search results. So for example, in Google. Next, we have the body. Now, this is where the visible stuff will be. This is essentially where you can put elements such as the ones we have discussed already, such as the paragraph element, the heading element, the image element, and many more. We can also set the primary language for our document. We can do so by simply adding the lang attribute to the opening HTML tag, so like this. This is useful as it will be indexed more effectively by search engines, allowing you to appear in more relevant search results. Okay, and there we have it. Let's start deep diving into some more elements next. We briefly touched on headings so far in this HTML module. However, I would like to take a breath to deep dive into them a little bit so you really get a good grasp of what they are and what they are used for. So once again, the heading element comes in 6 variations, with the H1 element being visually the biggest and the H6 heading being visually the smallest. Each one has an opening tag and a closing tag. In addition to this, it also tells our document which heading is the most important behind the scenes. So for example, if I was to give a web page an H1 element, our web page knows to treat this as the most important title on the page. Kind of like giving an essay its title, so we know what it's about. You should also only have one H1 element on a web page. Hey, you wouldn't name your essay twice, would you? After the H1 element, you also should use the subheadings in order, meaning the H2 element should come next, and then the H3 and so on. But you can have multiple subheadings of the same size. Again, just like when writing an essay. So for example, this is good, and this is not so good. However, there might be occasions where you might see these conventions broken. In addition to this, nesting multiple H1 elements was allowed in older versions of the HTML standard. However, it was never considered a best practice, so just keep that in mind. Now, you might be thinking, ooh, this does not look very fun. Well, don't worry, we can actually change what these headings look like using a programming language called CSS. CSS will allow us to change the font size of these headings, but not only that, allow us to change the color, weight, style, and much more. We will be looking at CSS right after the HTML module in this course. Another great and popular text-related HTML element is the paragraph element. It is essentially this cute little P tag right here. The P element represents a paragraph, or in other words, a block of text. We can use it to bunch up text that goes together, so like this. This means that if we put another paragraph element after this one, again with a bunch of text, it will appear spaced out from the other one. Now, it does not matter what line you put the text on. After all, if you put all of this on one line, it's kind of hard to read. So you can put the text on multiple lines in your code editor if you want. It will not affect how it looks like in the browser. You might see P elements written like this, or other ways too. Both of these approaches I am showing you are valid. Just like with the heading element, we can add CSS, or in other words, styling, to change the default styling of the paragraph element, meaning you can change this spacing amount. But not only that, we can change the font size, the color, the line spacing of the text, and so much more. We will be doing that in the CSS part of this course. So, by now we have had a very quick look at how to write our first elements. This included the paragraph element and heading element. Now, let's put what we learned into practice by creating an online recipe for macaroni and cheese. So, the first thing we're going to do is think about the website structure. I would like my recipe page to have a heading, followed by some sort of description. An ideal element to hold the content of a description would be a paragraph element. After this, I want to use a smaller heading as a subtitle to let people know that this section is for the ingredients necessary. After that, I will need some sort of list to list out all the ingredients. And next, another subheading, followed by the instructions in a numbered fashion. Wonderful. I think this is a good start. Now let's get to actually creating this with HTML. So first off, I'm going to ask you to create another folder on your desktop. This time, I want you to call it HTML Project 1. Once you have done that, I would like you to use what we have learned in order to create an HTML file in the project called index.html, as well as add the correct boilerplate to it in order to get started. Please pause here and have a go at doing this. Once you are done, let's go through the solution to getting this done together. Okay, so what I would do is, well, first off, I would just open up VS Code, so please go ahead and do that. And now I'm just going to open up that folder we just made, so that directory we just made. So just go ahead and on your desktop, find it, click on it, and open it up. So there we go. There is our empty directory, or in other words, empty folder. And all I'm going to do is just create that index.html file. So to do this, I'm just going to click on here, and I'm going to call the file index. And I'm going to give it the HTML extension, so .html, in order to let our code editor know to treat this like an HTML file. Wonderful. Now that we have that, let's get going with our project. So first off, I'm just going to put in my boilerplate code. I've just taken this from the previous project. I have not remembered it. Please don't try and memorize this. Okay, just make sure that you have your HTML element, your header element, and your body element. And the body element is essentially what's going to hold all our visible elements. Next, also make sure you have the meta tag up here as well so that we can see all the characters that we need. Okay, so our project is looking good at the moment. There is a few things we need to do outside of the meta charter. The other thing we have in this head element is the title that is going to hold the title of our project. It will not be visible in the browser. Once again, it will be visible in the tag and will also be visible as a title in Google search results. Okay, so let's go ahead and call this something. I'm going to go ahead and call it recipe, as that is what best describes what this web page is going to hold. The first one I'm going to put in is the H1 element. By choosing the H1 element, I am also doing something behind the scenes. Search engines indexing our web pages will consider the contents of the H1 heading more important than that of an H2 heading, for example. Without any headings at all, our page will perform poorly in terms of searchability online. or in other words, poorly in terms of SEO. One other thing that is happening is that we are defining this as the most important heading on the page for screen readers, used by the visually impaired. If no headings are provided, users of the screen reader will not be able to jump from heading to heading, and instead will be forced to read all of the text on the page as a lump of text. Once we have our heading, I'm going to move on to using a paragraph element for our description. So here is what our paragraph element will look like. Now, we can make certain words or phrases more important in the paragraph by using the strong element inside of this paragraph element. We would do so with the strong tag. Now, when using a screen reader, this word will be read out in a different tone of voice. Now, we can also visually see this has been applied bold styling. However, if we do not want the screen reader to read this out differently and just want to make this word look bold, we can use the bold tag instead. Other things we can do is emphasize using the EM element. Once again, the screen reader will use a different tone for this. And if we just want to make it look italic, we can use the I element like so. And great! I think we should now check this out in the browser, so what it looks like in the browser next. Before doing anything, don't forget to save this file. Once again, a shortcut to save this file is to press Command S on your keyboard. So please go ahead and do that. You will see the little dot disappear at the top of the File tab. Now, in order to actually view this file on the internet, you're going to have to get the actual file. So go ahead and left click on it, and then just go ahead and copy the path. So this one right here, that first one, get up your browser and paste it like so. And ta-da! There we have it. We can view that whole file in a browser. You're viewing your local file on your computer on your browser right now. Great. Now let's add a subheading for our list of ingredients. So by now, we know that a subheading is any heading below our H1 heading. I'm going to choose the H2 heading element for this. And wonderful. Now it's time to look at lists in the next section. In this section, I want to talk to you a little bit about the readability and presentability of code. For this, in HTML, I'm going to talk about indentation and spacing. Indentation and spacing should be consistent throughout your code. We can use either the 4-space or 2-space indentation in HTML. This means that each nested element should be indented exactly once inside their parent tag by either 4 spaces or 2 spaces. Okay, so as you can see, here's what it looked like when it's all beautiful and neat with 4 spaces of indentation. As you can probably see, everything is a bunch more readable, everything is kind of lumped together, and you can see which opening tag and which closing tag go together, just like the top article tag and bottom article tag. This is in contrast to bad code, like this. I mean, you can hardly tell which tag is starting where, what the parent elements are, which makes this overall a lot less readable than the previous version. Trust me, this will make it much more difficult when debugging and trying to find tags that go together in the future. Another thing you should do is format lines. So for example, in this case, you will see that the text in my paragraph element is too long. I would suggest splitting it out into multiple lines. Okay, so kind of like this. Okay? So this was just a quick break to talk about indentation and spacing. Please keep an eye on this moving forward. In this section, we're going to learn how to make lists, such as this section right here that shows the ingredients of a recipe, as well as this list right here, a ordered list that shows the steps in making our wonderful macaroni and cheese. List elements are actually made up of at least 2 elements, a wrapping element and the individual list item elements themselves. Your list can be an unordered list like this one, meaning that the order will not matter, or an order list. An unordered list is, however, perfect for listing out the items that we need to buy in order to make macaroni and cheese, as the order in which we buy them doesn't matter. The wrapping element for an unordered list is this UL element right here. And of course, we have the ordered list. An ordered list will give order to our list items. So just like we see here, we get 1, 2, 3. The element in order to make an ordered list is OL, as you can see by the wrapping element right here. As a default, the ordered list comes numbered like so, but we can also change it to be lettered. No matter which list type you choose, so the unordered list or the ordered list, it should have the list item elements inside. Once again, the syntax for a list item looks like this. It comes with an opening tag and a closing tag that will take content inside the list item element. In this case, it is some text, but it can also be much more. Let's have a look at this in code. Okay, so the first thing we're going to add is, as we discussed, an unordered list, add the ingredients, as the ingredients do not need to be in a specific order, right? Because it doesn't matter what order we buy them in. We might already have some in the kitchen, or we might need to buy some more. It really doesn't matter to us. So let's get up our unordered list element, which we now know is made up by these two tags with UL in them like this. Next, let's open it up because it's going to have to take some list items. So let's put in our list item elements. They are made up of the LI tags, an opening and closing tag, and we're going to put in 7 of them. So there we go. I've just gone ahead and created all 7, each with an opening tag and a closing tag that will take content inside of each one. Okay, so as a reminder, the content does not have to be just text. It could be images. It could be a bunch of elements nested inside of each other. That really is up to us. In this case, however, I'm just going to put some text. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to paste it in from somewhere I have written previously. So I'm just going to put it in for all 7 of these list items. I'm just putting in some text, and it's the ingredients for macaroni and cheese. Okay. So there we go. We now need to save this page. So save it pressing Command S, and let's check out what this looks like in the browser. Don't forget that we of course need to refresh our browser to see those changes. And great. There is our unordered list. Now that we have finished this, let's move on to make our ordered list. So once again, just like before, I'm just going to put in an H2 title, okay? So this is a subheading that I'm going to put in. It's just going to say how to make it. And underneath, that is where we're going to put our ordered list element. So the wrapping element that will take list item elements. So OL is the tag that we're going to use. It's going to have an opening and a closing tag. And inside of it, I'm just going to go ahead and put in 3 list item elements this time. So please go ahead and do the same, put in 3. And I'm just going to paste in these steps into making macaroni and cheese. So they're pretty simple. It's just going to be bring a pot of water to boil. Next, I'm just going to paste in a longer sentence. Okay, so you will see I have formatted it to put it on different lines so we can see it. And finally, just the final list item element. And that's going to say add cheese and macaroni. And that's it. How simple is that? So simple recipe. We're not going to win any Michelin stars for this, but we will have a cool recipe webpage that we have built. So once again, don't forget to save this page, pressing Command S, and then go to your browser and refresh it so we can see the latest version of the document. And ta-da! There we have it. Our ordered list is now on there too. In this next section, we're going to look at links. Links are great as they allow us to essentially link to other pages on our website, link to specific parts on a web page that we built, link outside of the web page that we built altogether and somewhere completely new on the internet, or even open up a prompt to email someone or call them. A link element syntax looks like an A element like this and stands for anchor. So if you hear someone calling it an anchor link, do not be surprised. Let's look at what makes up a link element now. So we have the opening and closing anchor tags. In between these tags, I'm going to put some text. so that our browser knows that if we click on this text, it will take us somewhere. So for example, I could put the word my YouTube channel. Here is what this will now look like in the browser. So it just looks like some text for now, nothing special. At the moment, of course, if we click on this link, it won't do anything. We have not given it enough information about what we want to happen if we click it, and where we want this link to take us. To do this, we need to define where we want the link to take us using the href attribute. We put the href attribute in the opening tag. Now, in the value, if we want to link it to my YouTube channel, I would take the full path to my channel and put it here. Okay, so now let's save this, refresh, and check it out. And wonderful! If we click on the link, we are now taken to my YouTube channel page. We can also use links to open up a mail option or option to call. All you need to do is put the mail to prefix followed by semicolons and the email address you want to populate your email recipient address with. So here we go, and if we save this file and go to the browser and refresh, you will see another link. If we click on this link, however, a prompt to email me will show up. We can also add a hyperlink to prompt calling. So once again, we will get the anchor tag, but this time for the value for the href, we will add the tel prefix like this, followed by a phone number. This isn't my number, by the way, so please don't go calling this random number, and apologies to the owner of this number in advance. This time, if we save this page and go to the browser and hit refresh, then click on the link, a prompt for calling that number will show up. As mentioned, we can also link to specific places on our webpage, but this time using IDs. For this, you'd first need to create the element you want to link to. Let's say this is a heading, for example. So here we have my heading element. As you can see, it has an ID that says other recipes. And here we have my link element, which has a href to the ID. Okay, so hash here represents an ID, and we're looking for the ID of other recipes. So here we have my heading element. As we know, using two H1 elements isn't really best practice, but this is just an example that I want to show you in terms of how to scroll to another main header. So for now, I'm just going to allow it. And here we have my link element. I would have to give my A-links opening tag the attribute of href and then pass through the ID. So hash means ID of the element we want to link to. So by giving it the value of hashtag other recipes, I am now saying I want to link to my H1 element with the ID of other recipes. And if I want my page to scroll to the element with the ID of other recipes, I would have to give the link the href of the ID, right? So let's grab the ID and let's stick it up here. Great. I am now just going to add an unordered list here in order to give length to the page, just so that the scroll is more obvious for when we scroll to this H1 element. And now let's check it out. So save the page first and let's go over to the browser and hit refresh. I'm just going to go ahead and increase the size of this page so that it is more obvious to everyone for when we scroll. So just increase the zoom on yours too if you need. So now let's test it out. I'm just going to click on here and wonderful. We managed to scroll to the H1 element. We have now finished building out our recipe project using HTML. So give yourself a round of applause. I think we did great. Now, we have not covered IDs in full just yet. There is a bunch more stuff we can do with them. This was just a quick taster. We will cover them in more detail later on in this course. So by now, we know that we can build web pages to link to external resources or link them to specific elements we built in order to scroll to them visibly on our web page. Another thing we can do with the link element is take a user to a specific page that we built on our site. To do this, let's go back to our project that we called My Portfolio. And let's have a look at our project structure first. So say we are on the index HTML page right here, and we want to access another HTML page. One of these pages, for example. We would have to write a path from where we are currently in the project tree to this folder called Pages, and then to the file we want out of these two. This is how you would do so. So bear in mind, we are starting from the index HTML page. We are going to go into the folder called Pages. Using the /, I'm going to go into that folder and pick out a file I want to show. Let's just say that file that I want to show is called About Me HTML. So let's just specify that in that path. Now, by clicking on this element, we will be taken to the About Me page. Let's test it out to see if what I'm saying is true. So, first off, let's make sure we are opening the correct project. So let's go ahead and get the project My Portfolio. So here we have our project. I'm going to go ahead and create a directory or folder for our extra pages called Pages. And in it, I'm going to create one file called about-me.html, making sure to not have a space but have a dash, and paste in some boilerplate code, as well as change the title of the page so that we know which page we are dealing with. Of course, don't forget to save this page. Now, on the home page, let's go ahead and add this link that we saw on this slide. Okay, so just added this like so. Now let's open up the index.html file, not the About Me HTML file. So save the page and copy the path to the index.html file and paste it into your browser. Now, don't forget to reload the page in order to get the latest documents. And let's go ahead and click here. And ta-da! We are on the About Me page. It has worked. Now, let's have a quick look at the path to this file here in the browser. Okay, so as this project is stored on my computer, I am starting at the root. So going into a directory called users on my computer, then going into a directory called Anyukubo, then into another directory called desktop, and then into the directory that we made called My Portfolio, into the pages directory I just made, and then getting the About Me HTML file to show up in our browser. Of course, when you host your projects online after buying your own domain, this will not look the same and will most likely look something like this, but we will leave that to the end. Now, what if we want to link back to the home page from the About Me page? Well, we need to navigate back. To do this, I'll go one level back in the tree, or in other words, out of the Pages folder. We need these two dots like this, followed by the slash, and then get the file we want to show. So let's test it out. So back in my project, I'm just going to go to the About Me page. So I'm just going to go right here and add an anchor link with the href. And as the path, I'm going to go back. So the two dots mean we go out of the folder. And then I'm going to essentially specify which file we want to show. Okay, so that's all I have done. So now let's check it out. So let's go back to our browser, hit refresh, click on the Go to About Me page. And here we are, we're on the About Me page. And here's the link we just made that says go to the home page. So let's test it out. Let's check that this takes us back to the home page. And it does. Okay, we are on the index.html page that lives in My Portfolio. And amazing. This is looking great. So the slashes that we see here in the path are essentially us jumping either backwards or forwards in the tree of my project from folder to folder. Essentially, imagine each of the folders in this tree as a slash. And if you follow the path to your next location and pick up a slant, it's like you've just added it to the path that you are constructing. Okay, so you're just picking them up like a train. Same thing for if you are leaving the folders. You will need to use the ... to go all the way back to your spot in the tree where the train is safe to proceed to get to its destination. Got it? Now, let's do another one. Imagine you are in this path called Contact HTML. What path would you have to put in your href in order to get to the About Me page? Have a think about it using this graphic of our project tree right here. Please pause here and do that, and once you are ready, just hit play. Well, as we are on the same location, so in the Pages folder, we don't need any slashes. Our train literally stops pretty much at the destination. So we just put the file name. Now, let's test it out. So first, let's create a contact page in the Pages directory, so contact.html, and I'm just going to put in some boilerplate code. And once again, just change the title to say contact, like we just did before with the About Me page. Now, in the contact page, I'm just going to put another link, so another anchor tag, and I'm just going to put go to the About Me page. And of course, we need to link this to that page. So I'm going to use the href, and I'm just going to put the About Me page, so about-me.html. Okay, so just like we did in the exercise, if we click on this link, it should take me to the About Me page. So this one right here. And actually in here, I'm just going to put in another link. So from the About Me page, I also want to be able to go to the contact page. So let's go ahead and add an A link. And then I'm just going to put go to the Contact Me page. And as the href, I'm just going to put contacts.html. So exactly what our contact page is called. Great. Now let's check it out. So save those files, go back to the browser and hit refresh. And now click on the About Me page link. And great, we see both those links. So we go to the home page or we go to the newly made Contact Me page. So let's click that. And great, we are on the Contact Me page. We see the title in the browser tab. We also see the path going to the pages directory and getting the contact.html page. And we see that link that we made on that page, which takes us to the About Me page. And let's test this one out too. And wonderful. That's exactly where it goes. Once again, as you can see by the tab name and the path that we have here. Okay, great. So hopefully this explains a little bit about how you would navigate from page to page on a website. Once you have this down, let's carry on. We are now going to move on from looking at how we can manipulate text in HTML and look at how we can add images to our web pages. We have already touched on images before, but for good practice, let's recap what we have learned so far about this wonderful element. In the introduction to HTML, we learned that unlike most HTML elements, the image element is one of the ones that uses a self-closing tag, meaning it only needs one tag like this. We also learned that it takes the source attribute that contains the path to the image we want to embed. This image can be in our project folder, and we can navigate to it by writing a path to the correct file. So we can use the URL address of an image that is hosted online. Just be aware that if the person or company hosting that image chooses to take it offline, you will no longer have an image here to display. You will see this broken URL icon right here instead. You will also see the alternative text if you choose to add that to your image element. The alt attribute is super helpful in occasions like this when the link to the image is broken or the image won't load, as it will allow the user to know roughly what it was about. It is also wonderful for the visually impaired who might use a screen reader to see what is on a web page. Let's try to put an image on the About Me page of our portfolio by putting an image of ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to choose to store an image in my project. All I'm going to do is find an image of me. So I'm going to choose this square JPEG. So just make sure yours is also a JPEG or a PNG file. And next, I'm actually going to create a directory. So making sure you're in the root of the project, so the same level as the index.html file, just go ahead and create a directory called images. And it's going to store all our image files from now on. So there we go. I just created a directory. It's on the same level as the pages directory and the index.html file. So let's go ahead and put an image in there. I'm simply going to drag an image in from my computer like this and drop it in. Wonderful. So there we have it. That is now done. And now let's go to the About Me page. And once again, I'm just going to use this code right here. So from the slide, and I'm just going to paste it in like so. So we now know that we need to get the path to this image and assign it to the source attribute. And I'm also going to provide some alternative text just in case this doesn't work for whatever reason, or just to make it accessible for everyone. So I'm just going to put an image of Anya Kubo. You can choose to put whatever you wish. Now the path to this, well, once again, let's look at the project tree. So I need to go back to the root of the project. So I need these two dots And then I need to go into the images directory. So I need to go into the folder. I'm jumping into the folder and I'm just going to put the name of the file that I want to access. Okay, so that's it. Now, if we save everything that we've done so far and just refresh the browser, making sure you're on the About Me page, amazing. You will see that image. It's unstyled at the moment, so it might be very big or it might be very small, but we will work on that when it comes to the styling section of this course. For now, this is looking good. Let's carry on. If you are having issues with this at any point, the final code will be attached to this lesson, so please go check it out. In this section, I want to show you how to work with tables. This is going to involve a lot of nested elements. So our HTML elements are getting a bit more complex. By the end of this lesson, you will have built something like this. But don't worry, we will build up to it step by step, starting with a tiny table first. So the simplest table element can take three types of elements: the table row element, the table header element, and the table data element. We would start off by creating the table element, which will wrap up all our content nicely so it all stays together. Inside, I need to start off by making some table rows. So let's say we want our table to have 3 horizontal rows. I would add 3 table row elements which look like this. So now we have some rows. I next need to decide what kind of columns I'm going to have. Let's say I want my first column to contain first names and my second column to contain last names. I would need to add the table header element to tell our browser we want this to be the name of the column. It would look like this. Now that we have defined the columns' names, we can fill out the rest of our data using the table data element. It would look like this. And that's it. That's a table in its simplest format. If you would like to give your table more semantic meaning for the browser, you can also define that the first table row belongs to the table's head by wrapping it in a T-head element and the rest in a table body element, so T-body. Visually, it will not change what you see in the browser, but it will help your website SEO as well as screen readers know what is going on. Okay? Cool. Got it? Good. Because now we are about to put all of this into practice by implementing a simple table onto our portfolio project. Okay, so back on the About Me page, I want you to put in a table in order to organize our future projects. This is what I want the end result to look like. So 3 columns, one for the hyperlink to the project, which we will leave the href blank for now, another column for the title of the project, and another column for a quick description of what the project is about and what technologies we used for it. For those of you thinking, wait, this is a pretty ugly table, are you sure we want to put this on our portfolio? Don't worry, the fun styling stuff is yet to be done. For now, let's just get building using the basic building blocks we have at our disposal. Okay, so what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Please have a go at building this yourself by pausing here. Once you have built your table, unpause and we will go through my chosen solution together. Okay, so what I would do is, well, on the About Me page, I would start off with my wrapper element, as mentioned. This will be the table element, as that's going to hold all our child elements together. So go ahead and create your table element. So there we go. There is an opening tag and a closing tag. And in here, well, I'm going to do the more advanced version of the table. So what I'm going to do is put in a T-head element as the first child of my table. So the T-head element looks like this, and it's essentially going to hold our header for our table. And then let's put the T-body element as the second child of the table element, and that's going to hold the rest. Okay? Great. So one child and a second child. Next, I'm going to create a table row for the head. So for this, I'm going to use the TR element. Once again, it has an opening tag and a closing tag. And once we do that, I'm just going to put in 2 of these in the body as well, so that we have 3 table rows in total. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put in the second table row here, and then just put in another one. Great. I'm just going to open them up because we're going to put content into here. Now in my first table row, I'm going to use the table header element, and we're going to have 3 of these because we want to have 3 columns, or essentially 3 table headers. And then I'm going to mirror that in the other table rows, however, with table data elements, so that we can sort data for each of our columns. So the first table header is going to have project, the second is going to have title, and the third is going to have description, as that is what I want my columns to be called. So there we go. So now if I refresh the page, so save your project and refresh the page, I'm just going to make this bigger. Ta-da! You should see right at the bottom are 3 table column names, or in other words, table header names. Great. So now let's get to putting in the data. So let's go ahead and do that back on my project in the first table data element. Well, I'm just going to put project 1. And in the second table data element, I'm going to put the title of that project is the one we made, is the macaroni and cheese recipe. And then I'm just going to put in a short description of that project. Okay, so this is what our table is going to look like. It's going to have a project, it's going to have the title, and it's also going to have a short description. Wonderful. And let's do the same for the other one. For this one, I'm just going to put project 2, and this is going to be our table tennis leaderboard. So let's go ahead and put table tennis leaderboard. Okay. And then again, let's just put in a description. It's very long, so I'm just going to format it a little bit better to make this more readable. This will not be shown in the browser. This is for us just to be able to see this in our project right now. So there we go. And there we have it. That is our table. I'm just going to put some more text in here just to pad it out a bit. Wonderful. So now, ta-da! That is what our table looks like. It's got 3 rows, 2 for the data and 1 for the column. I think this looks great. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and add 1 final table row just to kind of prepare us for what we are going to be putting in the future. So let's go ahead and make that table row. Let's put in a table data element with project 3. And of course, we haven't made this yet. So I'm going to put TBD as the project title, as well as TBD for the project description. But essentially, we're going to add a bunch more projects into here. So just so you know what this looks like, I've gone ahead and added another table row element. Wonderful. So this is looking great. I'm really happy with how this is looking so far. Of course, without any styling yet. The last thing I want to do is just wrap the first column entries in a links, so an anchor links, because we're going to want to link to this in the future. At the moment, I'm just going to leave an empty href attribute. Okay, so this will just give this the appearance of links, but without actually going anywhere. So just do that for all the A elements like so. And great. So we have now created some links. Of course, they will not work, but visually, at least this column looks like links. This is the final look that I want to aim for. Wonderful. Okay, so I think we are done with this project for now. Let's move on. Now that we have covered some of the many text-related HTML elements, let's move on to the fun stuff, which allows us to create shapes and add colors to our website, starting with the content division element, or in other words, the div. I like to think of the div as a beautiful being that can be anything you want it to be. We can give the div a height, we can give it a width, and we can give it a background color using CSS, or in other words, styling, which we will cover in the next section. We can also use it in a very basic form without styling to hold other elements together. So, for example, we can create a div, put a heading in it, then put a paragraph in it, and now these 2 elements will be grouped together. So, you might think, great! So, with this div, I can now group together pieces of information to start adding structure to my web page. Well, not to throw a spanner in the works, but you are partially correct. The div should only be used if the section element, article element, nav element, header element, or footer element don't apply. Why, you ask? This is because these elements all have semantic meaning and will be interpreted by your browser to be an element that holds a section, an element that holds an article, an element that holds the navbar, an element that is the header of your website and the footer of your website. The div does not have this. It's like a mysterious ghost. Let's have a look at some elements with semantic meaning in the next section. By now, we should know that elements that make up a web page can have semantic meaning. This means that the web browser will see them and recognize what the element is meant for. This makes it good for users of assistive technologies like screen readers, and they are also good for SEO. We have the header element, which represents quite literally a header. This can hold things such as your website's logo, a search bar, and other things typically seen in a website's top element. The header element is not to be confused with the head element, which, as we now know, holds the website's metadata, so all the invisible stuff. Just like the header element, we have the footer element, which literally represents the footer of your webpage. You can put anything you want in the footer. However, typically you would see something like information about the company, copyright data, or any links that you would want to give the website viewer. Next up, we have the nav element, which represents the navigation bar on your website. It will usually contain a menu or a list that will allow you to navigate between all the pages on your website. We also have the section element, which represents a standard section of a document. Sections should have headings in them. After all, think of when you read a book. It would be kind of strange to see a new section that didn't have a header for you to know what the text in the section was about, right? Without this heading, the element will not appear in the document outline. If you do not want to put a heading element in the section, perhaps it's not really a section you are after. Perhaps a div would work better on this occasion. The last popular sectioning element I want to cover is the article element. An article element can represent things such as newspaper articles, a blog entry, a product card, a user-submitted comment, or a forum post, amongst other things. Just as with the section, the article element should include a heading element nested inside of it. Now, I must stress there are many more semantic sectioning elements to your disposal. I have simply covered the most popular ones or the ones that might be a bit tricky. However, there are all these other ones as well at the time of recording. If you have the time, I would suggest doing a quick Google of each if you are interested. I feel most are pretty self-explanatory, so if you don't feel like Googling, it's fine. Let's carry on. So, by now we have covered the most popular text-based HTML elements as well as some semantic sectioning elements and the div. I am now going to ask you to put all of your knowledge to the test by building out this table tennis leaderboard. Unlike in the first project, I'm going to leave you to it this time. The goal is to create a directory, or in other words, folder, called HTML Project 2, create an HTML page to go into the project with the correct boilerplate code, and then use the elements we have covered to recreate what we visually see here. You are, of course, free to refer to the previous lessons we did in this course so far, and don't worry, that is in no way cheating. No one is expecting you to memorize these things. Even I still copy and paste HTML boilerplate code. So once again, this project will utilize everything we have learned so far, as well as 3 new elements that I briefly listed out in the semantic sectioning elements video. Okay, so these 3 will be used in this project section. It is a hairline element, which is essentially a line, an element that will allow us to write captions, and the figure element as well. So please go ahead and do some Googling by yourself on these 3. This is an excellent lesson in Googling. And once you are ready, please have a go at this. Once you are happy with your project and you want to see how I would choose to create this page, please click on the next video. And remember, there is no one way to create this page. There are literally thousands of ways you could do it. So get going and I will see you soon. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the solution to how I personally would create a table tennis leaderboard that looks like this. Okay, so I'm excited to show you. First things, I'm just going to create a new folder on my desktop. I'm going to call it HTML project 2, just like we decided in the previous video. Okay, and once I've done that, I'm just going to open it up in VS Code. So I'm just going to open that folder. So please go ahead and do the same. Open it up in your code editors just simply by pressing open folder, finding that project on your desktop, clicking on it and opening it up. So great, I'm now in my project. There is nothing in here at the moment. So let's put in our first file. So all I'm going to do is click on here and create an index.html page, not forgetting to give it that HTML extension to let our code editor know to treat this as an HTML file. Okay, so go ahead and do that. And now I'm just going to put in my boilerplate code. So as we know for our boilerplate code, we can just copy paste it. So that's what I've done. I've pasted it from another project. And now I'm going to put in the title of my project. This title will not be visible to us, okay, in the browser. It will be visible in the tab of the browser, and it will be visible if you uploaded this onto the internet and search for it in Google. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and call this table tennis. So please go ahead and do the same. Great. Before we get to putting in anything in our body elements, I just want to open this up in the browser so we can see what it looks like. So all I'm going to do is just left click on the index.html document right here, and then copy the path and then go to my browser and just paste in that URL like so. So there we go. That is what index.html page looks like. And as you will see, you can see table tennis in the tab name. Great. Now let's get to adding some elements in the body elements. So first off, I'm just going to put an H1 element. And for my H1 element, I'm just going to put table tennis, just like so. So now if we save that file and refresh the page, this is what it should look like. We can see that H1 element in our browsers. Great. Next, let's move on by putting an H2 element in here. So in my H2 element, this is going to be a subheading, and all I'm going to do is put in some text. So I'm going to put classroom tournament leaderboard, just like so. And now if we save this file and go ahead and look in the browser, so let's refresh the browser, you will see classroom tournament leaderboard showing up. Wonderful. We have an H1 element and we have an H2 element, so a subheading element. Let's carry on. Next, let's get to creating some semantic sectioning in here. And first off, I'm just going to start off with creating a table. So here's my table element. It is a wrapping element that's going to take a bunch of other elements in order to create our table. The first one being the T head element. So just go ahead and put in a T head element and then put in a T body element for the rest of our table rows. Okay? So our table head element, well, we know this has to contain a row. So let's go ahead and put that in. So that is my whole table head. And in my table row, well, I'm going to define our table headings. One is going to be a position heading. So just go ahead and put position. One is going to be for the name of the person playing in the tournament. The third is going to be for if they won or not. And the fourth is going to be if they lost or not. So it's going to be a count of won and lost tournaments. So if we refresh the page in our browser, that is what it looks like at the moment. We have created 4 table headings, or in other words, 4 table columns. Great. This is looking good. Next, I'm just going to put in some table rows that are in the body. So essentially for our data. Our first table row is going to have a table data element. So I'm just mirroring the table heading. So I'm going to have 4. Okay, so we're essentially going to create table rows for these columns. Well, our first table data cell is going to have the position. So we're going to have position 1. Then we're going to have the name of the player who's in position 1. It's going to be Marlene Gomez, and she's going to have won 5 and lost 0. So save this and refresh the browser. And amazing, we have just created our first table row to go on our table. Let's go ahead and create another one next. Okay, now let's create our next table row. So we know how to do this now. Just go ahead and use the TR tags to create a table row. And then in here, I'm going to put 4 table data elements because we want to essentially put data for a position, a name, a won, and a lost value. So let's go ahead and do that. In fact, I'm just going to copy this as we're going to have a few of these. So we have 1 table row. Let's go ahead and paste another. So we have 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Okay, and let's do it. So my first table row, I'm going to put position 2. The name is going to be Mohammed Leroy, and he's going to have won 4 and lost 1. Okay, next as position 3, I'm going to have the name of, let's go with Patricia Bennett. Okay, so that's the name I have chosen, Patricia Bennett, and she has won 3 and lost 2. Position 4 is going to go to Sam Lehman. He has won 2 and lost 3. Position 5 is going to go to Young Lee. He has won 1 and lost 4. And then let's do position 6 as well. And this person is Astrid Genevieve, and she has won 0 and lost 5. And I think that's it. So we just need 6. So let's save that. Let's go back to our browser and refresh. And ta-da! There is our Classroom Tournament leaderboard. We have just completed our table. This is looking great. So let's carry on. The next thing I want to do is just put in a line. And for this, I'm going to use the HR element that I did say to Google previously. So if you Googled it, you would know that the result would look like this. And it's just a nice way to split this out. Okay? Wonderful. So we have just split this out by creating a line thanks to the HR element, which looks like this. Let's move on. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is put in another subheading. This is going to be smaller than the other subheading we have. So I'm going to use an H3 element for this. So please go ahead and do the same. Just use your H3 element and put in the title or the subtitle of Rules of Table Tennis and a colon just like so. So just like I have. Now, the rules of table tennis, this was an ordered list. So I'm going to choose to use the OL element. So here are my OL tags. And inside, I'm going to have to put list elements. My first list element is going to contain the text of games are played to, and then I'm going to make a bold number. So I'm using the bold tags. Or if I want to give this semantic meaning to the browser, I can use the strong tags. So each was fine to use. Okay, whichever one you use is okay. And then I'm just going to put space and points. Great. Our next list item is going to have the text of alternative serves every 2 points are mandatory. And this time I'm going to put the number 2 in strong. So let's just get up our strong tags and I'm just going to put the number 2 in there. Great. Let's just minimize this for now. Let's make our third list element. So our third list element, this one is going to have the text of make sure to toss the ball straight up when serving. Okay, so that is my third list item. Let's check it out. So say that page and refresh, and wonderful. So we've just made our rules of table tennis. It is an ordered list, and you can see the 10 and 2 are in bold. So that is looking great. Let's carry on. Now, what else do we need to create? Well, I just want to create a paragraph element. That's going to take some text, and that text is going to be in italics. So I'm going to use the I element for this. Okay, you could have also used the EM element if you wanted to give the page semantic meaning, but I'm just going to give it the I element for now. So again, each one is good. In here, I'm going to put official rules can be found on the international, making sure to spell international correctly, table tennis website. So that is now going to appear italic on our page. and I'm going to actually hyperlink here. So to do this, I need to get here and put it in some A tags or the anchor link. And next, I need to give the anchor link first tag. So let's just space this out a little bit, making sure that the indentation is correct. So let's just make sure that those I tags are on the same level and the P tags are on the same level. Next, to make this link work, I need to give the first tag of the A link an href attribute. And I'm just going to go ahead and type in the URL to the actual International Table Tennis website. So this is it for all of those curious. Okay, that is the link to the International Table Tennis website. Great. So now if I refresh this, amazing. We get some text in italic and the here is hyperlinked. And if we click on it, it does take us to the official table tennis page. How cool is that? Let's carry on. Let's just make the official spell correctly first. And great. Next, I'm going to put in another line. So let's go ahead and use our HR element again. Now I'm going to put another subheading. So I'm going to use my H3 element again. And this time I'm going to have the game setup. So game setup is going to be my subtitle. Now I'm going to have a P element in here. And this is essentially just going to give us some more information. So it's just going to say the game should be set up as per the table tennis tournament at Liga Pro. Okay, so just giving some insight into how the table tennis table should be set up. And finally, I'm going to show a picture of this. So I'm going to use the figure element. This is another element that I asked you to Google in the previous video. So hopefully you did that. And this figure element. Okay, so for this, we're going to actually have to put in an image element in here. So go ahead and do the same. It's a self-closing tag. And then for this image, we can have a figure caption. So that is my figure caption element, the third element that I asked you to Google in the previous video. So hopefully you did that as well. Great. Now in my fig caption, I want this to appear in italic. So I can use the I element or I can use the EM element if you want to give it semantic meaning. That is up to you. And I'm just going to give this image taken from Wikipedia. Okay. So that is what I'm going to do. And I'm actually going to hyperlink Wikipedia too. So just whack in Wikipedia here. And as the opening tag of my A element, I need to give it the href attribute along with the link to Wikipedia, which is this for table tennis. Great. Okay. So this is looking good. Let's go ahead and find an image. So just whack in that Wikipedia URL and then copy the image address to this table tennis image. And then as the source of this, just put in the URL to that. So as long as that web page exists, as long as that picture exists, this picture should appear in our own project. So just go ahead and do that. Or you can put a picture in here. Okay, that is up to you. Just like we did previously, you can put a picture in here that you uploaded and made an image directory. You could have done it both ways. Both ways are absolutely fine. So I hope you did either of those. Or if not, let me know what you did. Finally, I'm going to put an alternative tag to this image element. So I'm just going to space it out so we can read it a little bit better and put alt as the attribute and then some alternative text, which in this case, I'm going to have table tennis tournament as. Great. Okay. So this is looking wonderful so far. Shall we check it out on the browser? I'm just going to space this out a little bit so it's more readable. So essentially, I am just putting everything on new lines and making sure that each element is essentially in line with each other in terms of indentation. Okay? So there we go. Each nested element is more indented than the other. Wonderful. This is looking great. That is my whole URL. So now let's recap what we've done. So we added an H3 element as a subheading. We added a P element as a subheading. So now this is a lot. I think we've done well. One other thing we probably should do, as all of this game setup is essentially associated with each other, we should probably put it in a section element to hold it all together. And we can do that as we have an H3 element, so we have a title. So let's go ahead and create our section element. So our section element looks like this. And in here, we're essentially going to store all of that that's associated with game setup. So there we go. That is it. And finally, let's format it to make sure that all the tags are indented on the same level and that each nested element has indentation as well. Great. Let's do the same for the rules of table tennis. I'm just going to put that in its own section. So there we go. And now let's format it so that each nested element is on the right level. And great. So now let's check it out. Save that page, refresh, and there we go. That is what our table tennis leaderboard looks like. It looks amazing. It looks exactly like we wanted it to. It looks exactly like the image that I showed you at the beginning. I hope you also have this. And if you've done it in any other way, please do share your code with me on Twitter. Please either paste a link to your code pen or a picture of your code. I would love to see. In the next few sections, I'm going to be focusing on creating forms. Forms are a fantastic way of submitting a bunch of information together. We use them on sites to get back feedback, write in, or even sign up and log in. Forms are made up of a bunch of elements that are nested in between the two form tags. Some typical tags that can live inside the form element are the input elements, label elements, or field set elements. However, you can technically put in any elements you like. The form opening tag can take certain attributes. It can take the action attribute, which takes a URL that will take care of the form submission, as well as the method, which takes the HTTP method to submit the form. Don't worry about this for now, as this is an advanced topic we will cover later. All you need to know for now is that the input with the type submit is how you would essentially trigger the action attribute with the method attribute to submit form data when you wish. The input element with the type submit generally does not need a label element associated with it. This is unlike an email input, for example, which would benefit from having a label element. In the next section, we are going to look at the other types of input types, as well as the various attributes that we can use. How an input tag looks and works wholly depends on the type attribute and the value you assign to it. By default, if no type is provided, it will take the form of a text input, so use the text type. Here is a full list of the different types available to us. I'm not going to go through all of them as some will be self-explanatory, but to help you get the gist of how input types work, let's whiz through the most popular ones now. Try to remember them as there will be an exercise straight after this. So let's start with the text input. In fact, the input element, like I said, will default to the text type, even if we don't supply it with a type. So this is an easy one to remember. We can also add other attributes to the text input. For example, we can control what the minimum length of text and or maximum length of text can be with the min length and max length attributes. We can also add a placeholder to provide a hint as to what type of text we want in here. We can also make it required with the required attribute, or we can make it read-only. If we start working with JavaScript, we might want to use the name value of the input so we can work with it in a more readable way. This means that we can send over the value of what we put into the input along with the input's name if we have loads and loads of inputs in our form. In this case, it would be first name and year. Next, let's look at the button type. If we take the input element and assign the type button to it, it will look like this. So a button. At the moment, it of course won't have any functionality, but it certainly does look like a button, doesn't it? We can also add a value in order to change the text inside the button too. Another attribute that goes in the button element can be disabled. This will visually disable the button and prevent users from being able to interact with it. Now, what if we switch this to a checkbox type? Well, we get a checkbox visually that we can choose to tick or untick. It can also take a value. However, this time, this is not displayed in the browser, or in other words, on the client side. It is used on the server side so that we can take the value of the checkbox and use it for our computing needs along with the checkbox name. This means that when the form is submitted, the data name value pair will be subscribe newsletter. If no value is supplied, the name value pair would simply be subscribe on if the checkbox is ticked. Next up, let's see what happens if we change this to be a color type. The input element then takes the form of a color picker. As we can see here, we can click on the element and then drag the cursor to select a color, which will generate an RGB value for it, or a HSL value, or a hex value. We can also choose what color we want to start on by assigning a value to the input element. Now, let's move on to the date type. By supplying the date type, we are creating an input that looks like this. So essentially a date picker for the year, month, and day when active in supporting browsers. This input is fun as we can of course set a default value using the value attribute, but we can also set a min and max date. This means you will not be able to select dates in the date picker outside of this range. And if we change this to date time local, an option to select the time will show up too. Next up, let's look at the email type. Now, this might look like a normal text input, but it has certain validation parameters, meaning it won't accept the field unless you give it a @ sign and a domain. We can actually change these validation parameters by using the pattern attribute and using regex. Regex or regular expressions are rules that govern which sequence of characters come up in a search. There is much to learn on regex, which we will not be covering in this course. But if you would like to know more about how to write these rules, please check it out in the link below. In addition to the pattern attribute, we can also have other attributes such as max length, min length, multiple for multiple email addresses, and placeholder for displaying some placeholder text. Next up, we have the radio type. You might be thinking, hold on, this is just the checkbox type but a circle. Well, there is one big difference. Only one radio button in a given group can be selected at any point in time. This is different to the checkbox, in which you can select multiple checkboxes. Here is what a group of radio inputs can look like and behave like. We can even give them label elements and link them to the respective input with the for attribute, which correlates to the radio element's ID. The range input is another fun one, in that it has this cool slider. We can set a min and max range for the slider, as well as hardcode the value it is currently at with the value attribute. If we want to increment the slider to our biggest steps, we can do that, quite literally with the step attribute too. And finally, the last input type I want to show you is the submit type, which we briefly touched on already. Just like the button type, we can change the text in the button using the value attribute. However, we should only use the submit type to actually trigger submitting the form. The form element and the input with the type submit are linked. If you want to have other uses for the button inside the form and write your own custom JavaScript, such as to update the value of an input dynamically or select something, I would suggest using the button type. And that's it. We have just covered the most popular input types. Let's move on with some exercises. Okay, so welcome to the part where we're going to practice everything we have learned so far in the last section on inputs in order to really hone in our skills all about inputs. So we're going to have 3 exercises. We're going to have to replicate what we see visually with code. So to do this, let's create a kind of scratchpad that we're going to work with. So all I'm going to do on my desktop is create a project that I'm going to call classwork. So there we go. There we have our classwork folder. And now let's open it up in VS Code. So go over to VS Code and find that project. So go ahead and find it on your desktop, click on it and open it up. Okay, great. And now what do? Well, we need to create our index HTML file. So go ahead and create an index HTML file, making sure to use the HTML extension Okay, so that code editor knows to treat this as an HTML file. And there we go. Step 2 is going to be to add the boilerplate code. So please paste some in from a previous project. And let's just call this Scratchpad for now. Great. Please go ahead and save this file. Now let's open it on the browser by grabbing the path and pasting it in the browser, like we've been doing so far. Great. Now that we have that done, let's continue. So now that our setup is done, let's have a look at the exercises that we need to replicate. So for exercise 1, I want you to create an input that will take an email. And it's obviously a company email that takes a certain domain. So please take that into account and also take into account the fact that this has to be an email. So 3 things here, and you also have a placeholder visible, so that is also something you're going to have to add. And of course, we also have a submit button that will submit our attempt at putting in an email. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to leave you to this. I will, however, leave you with the knowledge that all of this has to come in a form element, okay? Otherwise, it will not work as intended when submitting. Okay, so here we have the form element. Now please go ahead and make sure all your work is done in between these 2 tags. So I'm going to leave you here. Please pause here and unpause when you're ready to go through my solution together. Okay, so what I would do is, and of course this is just my solution, there are many ways to do this, is first off, I would create an input element. So let's go ahead and create one like so. So it is just one tag like this. And I'm going to go ahead and give this the type of, you guessed it, email. So there we go. So now if we look in the browser and hit refresh, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. We have the input with a type of email, right? So it looks like a text type, but we know it has a different semantic meaning and different functionality. So now let's go back as we need to add a few more things into this input element. And also, I'm also going to add a label element as we did see that in the example. And this is for the below input. So let's link it up. And how do we link it up? Using for and ID. So let's add the for attribute to the label and let's add the ID attribute to the input. So let's go ahead and give this the ID of email input. You can go ahead and call it whatever you wish. And now let's grab the ID and just paste it into the for attribute on the label. So now both are linked up. Okay, we've just linked it up using the for and ID attributes. Great. Let's go ahead and add some text into the label. I'm going to just go ahead and put, please use a udemy.com email. Okay, just like so. So now if we look in here, ta-da, the label is now showing up. This is looking good. The next thing I want to work on is the placeholder. So to add a placeholder, I would do this on the input tag. I'm just going to minimize this for us. And I'm going to put placeholder and I'm just going to put Ania at udemy.com. Of course, I don't work at Udemy, so this is fake. Let's go check this works. And great. We will now see some placeholder text that will be replaced as soon as we start typing. Now, let's go ahead and add something else visually, and that is the submit button. So we know by now that we don't use an actual button. We're going to use an input with a type of submit, and that input will trigger submitting the form, as both are linked. So let's go ahead and put an input with a type of submit. So just like that, and refresh the page in order to see it. As a default, the value of this is submit, but we can change it with the value attribute. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to put that in like so. Okay, so there we go. However, right now, I can go ahead and put Dan at dansworld.com and sign in, and that will submit. Okay, so that has technically worked. It is refreshed. It's technically submitted. We haven't put any extra functionality at the moment. So our form by default is just refreshing the page. But we know that we need this to be a Udemy address, right? So we would like an error message showing up. To do this, we need to add the pattern attribute. So my pattern attribute, well, I'm just going to add the string of plus@udemy.com. And now I am saying that I want the domain to be udemy.com for the email. I'm just going to space this out so it looks a little bit more readable at the moment. Okay, so just go ahead and do the same. Great. So we have just added the pattern. Make sure there's a dot there. Let's check it out. So now I'm just going to refresh this page to load the changes and type dan@dansworld.com and try to sign in. We get that error message. So there we go. We have essentially blocked other email addresses from signing up. Just like when we do a D, that won't work. It will say there's no email present. So now we've officially made some validation happen on our email. Great. So the form is not submitting, it's not refreshing, so we are being stopped from signing in. Wonderful. So we have now completed exercise 1. This is how I would solve it. However, if you have done it another way, then please do share that with me on Twitter. I would absolutely love to see. Okay? So look forward to seeing your solutions over there. In the meantime, let's move on to exercise number 2. In exercise 2, I would like you to build this range input that will essentially allow us to increment the steps by 20 in order to get from 0 to 100% of this range. Okay, so that's all I would like you to do for this exercise. Please go ahead and do this. Once again, the min value will be 0 and the max value will be 100, and I want the increment to be in 20s. In addition to this, I would like the default to start right here. Okay, so make sure to make that happen as well as add a label to the input. So please go ahead and do this, and once you are happy with your solution, we'll go through a solution together. Okay, so first off, I would just start off by putting an input element and assigning it the type of range. So a range that is very smooth in its movement, so there's a few things that we need to change. So we need this to increment in 20, so let's go ahead and add the attribute of step with the value of 20, so that if we now refresh our page, our range input will now look and behave like this. So not as smooth, but it's incrementing in 20. So let's carry on. The next thing I want to do is just give it a min and a max value. So I'm going to send min to be 0 and max to be 100. So just like this. If we actually change this to be an 80, well, I'm just going to show you what happens. Our step that increments in 20 has 4 steps, as 4 times 20 makes 80. So there's 4 steps, but we want this to be 100. So let's just go back and change it to be 100. Great. So as default, this will be 100, but I just wanted to emphasize that by putting it here. Next, I also want to code these start values. So I want this to be at 20 because I want it to appear around about here. So that's exactly where it is. I've just hard-coded 20. And finally, let's just give it a label. So I'm just going to use the label element for this by creating a label element and then putting in some text. This text is going to be volume. And now let's link the label to the input using the for and ID attributes. So for, I'm going to put volume input, and for the ID, I'm going to put the same, so volume input. So great, they are now linked. So we've done it. We have our input. It's looking exactly like the exercise at the beginning. Now, you should actually put this in a form element like I said. So if you want to submit this eventually, 2 things you will need are the form element like so as a wrapping element, as well as the input with a type of submit. Okay, so if you would like to submit the value of this input with the type of range, those 2 things will be needed. Great. So this looks great. I hope you've enjoyed this exercise. Please do share your solution with me on Twitter via the link below. If you've done this another way, I would absolutely love to see. And finally, for the third and final exercise, I want you to essentially build out this form that will allow us to pick one of the 3 options about how our experience was at a theme park. So this is what I want you to build. You're going to have to think of a way to pick out one option out of a bunch of options and then submit it via a form. So please think about this. Pause here, and I'm excited to see how you do this by yourself and then go through a solution together. So see you in a bit. Okay, so what I would do is, well, here we have our form. First off, I'm just going to create an H1 element, okay, because this was bigger than a label. So I'm going to use the H1 element for this, and I'm going to put, how was your time at Happy Land? Okay, so that's what my H1 element is going to look like. Now, we can have this in the form. That is absolutely fine, okay? So I've decided to put it in the form. And next, we need to decide what kind of input type we're going to use for the multiple choices. The type I'm going to use is radio. Why radio and why not checkbox? This is because radio will allow us to choose one of the three options and not allow us to select multiple options, like the checkbox type. So in the input, I'm of course going to have the type radio, but I'm also going to give it a label. The label is going to say bad, and I'm going to link it to the above input with the for and ID attributes. So let's link them up by the same name. Let's have bad input, and let's put the ID as bad input as well. Great. So there we go. And for good measure, I'm just going to give this a name just in case, in the future we want to link this up to JavaScript. We don't really need to do this now, but I think it's good practice to start adding names to these types of inputs. So as a name, I'm just going to give this the name of experience, okay? Because it's all related to one experience. So well done if you chose to add that name attribute there. You're really thinking about the future. So let's check out what this looks like at the moment. Great. So we've got our bad input. Let's create another input. So let's go ahead and use the input element and create a label for it. This is going to say, okay, let's link them up using the for and ID attributes. And I'm going to put okay input here and give this the ID of okay input. Great. Now let's also give this the type of radio, and let's essentially link it to the other input by the name attribute of experience. Okay, so once again, when it comes to JavaScript, this will be important for when we want to essentially get the value of our inputs with the type radio. In addition to having this name attribute for when it comes to work with JavaScript, we're also going to have to give both of these a value. So remember, a key value pair made up of the name and value. So I'm just going to give the top one the value bad and the second one the value okay. Wonderful. Once again, these are important for the key value pair for when we start working with JavaScript. It's not really necessary now, so if you don't add them, don't worry. And now the final input, let's go ahead and create that input element. Let's go ahead and create a label element. This one's going to have the text of good, and let's link them up with the for and ID attributes. Let's call this good input and give this the ID of good input and give this a type radio. And again, give it the name of experience and value of good. Wonderful. We are now done. So this is how it looks like on the radio inputs. We can also have one checked as a default if we want, simply by adding the checked attribute. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it on this one. And that will mean that this one is checked by default. And of course, we can change it. And we are not selecting multiple ones, as you will notice right now. Great. The final thing we need to do is just add an input with a type of submit that has the visual appearance of a button, but essentially will allow us to submit this form if we click on it, along with the value of the one we chose, and hopefully in the future when we hook this up in JavaScript. And there we go. Once again, I hope you had fun with these exercises. Please do share them with me on Twitter because I would love to see what you have done with yours. Otherwise, let's continue. In this next section, we're going to talk about the select element in order to create one ourselves. The select element allows us to select an option from a drop-down menu and looks like this. So we have the select element, which we will name with the name attribute for when we want to pick it out with our JavaScript. And then we have all these option elements nested inside of it. Now, each option element has a value, again, for when we need to pick it out with our JavaScript. And then the text of what we want to see visually in the browser in between the two option tags. The select element is usually accompanied by a label element, which is linked to the select element with the for and ID attributes. So that is the code for writing a select dropdown, and this is how it behaves. It is for this reason that it could be wise to have the first option element contain the text, please choose an option, with no value, so just an empty string, to represent nothing being chosen even if we click on it. But this is not required. One other thing we can do is hardcode the selected value by using the selected attribute on the option element. On the select element itself, we can have many attributes. Some of these include the disabled attribute that looks like this, the required attribute, or the multiple attribute to be able to select more than one option. Got it? Good! Now it's time for a little exercise. Okay, so let's get to practicing what we learned in the previous section by building a select dropdown. So this time we're not going to be using snacks. Let's go ahead and recreate what we see on a e-commerce site by having a drop down of sizes. So we're going to have extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, and extra, extra large. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. First off, we're going to start off the label, right? So there we have our label, and this label is going to say select your size, and next under here we're going to have the select, of course. So it's going to have an opening tag and a closing tag, and I'm just going to pause here and ask you to complete the rest of this exercise next. So once again, it's a drop down for an e-commerce site that will allow us to pick sizes for our garment. Okay, pause here and let's go to the solution in a bit. Okay, before we do anything, I'm just going to link up the label to the select with the for and ID attributes. As a reminder, I'm just linking the label to the select with these attributes. So let's make sure that these are the same. I'm going to have size list and size list right here for the ID too. Okay, so there we go. And now let's add some options. So my first option is just going to have the value of blank. I'm just going to leave it a blank string, and this is going to say, please select your option. So there we go. Our first option is essentially a blank value, and our second option is going to have the text extra small. Next, we're going to have another option with a size small, and then we're going to have a third option. Let's actually just paste in a few with medium, large, and extra large. And then one more for extra, extra large. Great. So there we have it. Visually, this will look fine, but we know we have more to do. We need to add a value to this as well, so that when it comes to picking this out in JavaScript, we are prepared. So let's go ahead and give this the value. So I'm just going to give this a readable value for when we need to pick this out later on, and it's just going to be the string XS. This value, I'm going to give the value of S. Here, I'm going to put an M. For this one, I'm just going to put an L. For this one, I'm going to put the value of XL. And you guessed it, for the last one, I'm just going to put the value of XXL. And there we go. So this is looking good. And for good measure, we know we need to give the select a name. And let's go ahead and call this sizes. So once again, this is for eventually picking it out with JavaScript. So now if we look in here, we can select our size and we can see the options. Now, if I was to change this to be extra small, like so, and save, you will see that that has changed. However, I'm just going to put that back to the way it was. If I put extra small here, nothing will change, okay? Once again, this is because this is for our JavaScript. and should actually technically be written as one word or two words connected by a dash in order for this value to get picked up. Okay, so there we go. That is some knowledge for you for when it comes to picking stuff up with our JavaScript later on. And wonderful. So that is our select exercise done. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's move on. Now, I just want to take a quick break to talk to you about the Inspect tool. Google Chrome's Inspect tool can give us a lot of information about what is going on in our browser. In fact, it can show us exactly what code we are sending to the browser and in what state. I'm going to show you how to inspect this browser, so our browser right here, now. So here we are back on our select exercise that we just did, and here is the select dropdown that we just made. Now, if I go ahead and left click on the browser while pressing Control on my laptop, you will see this show up. I'm simply going to click on the Inspect tool in order to get up this Inspect tool for us. This will show us many tabs, including the Elements tab, which will show us the elements making up our web page that we are viewing. As you will see, this is exactly our document that we are working on. So you will see the HTML element, you will see the title element that we gave our document, and you will also see the body tag in which we added a label element and the select element with all the options that we just coded just right here. So this is pretty cool, and we can now hover over so we can choose to select items in our browser, which will show us exactly which element we are selecting, or we can select them here. So just click off that and select maybe this label, and this will show you that label in the browser along with the size of that element, along with any styling that has been applied to it. At the moment, there has not been any styling added by us. This is just the default styling under the Styles tab. What is also cool is that we get a console. We will not be using this now, but we will be using this in the JavaScript section very heavily. So just keep that in mind. So this is the Inspect tool. It's really useful for us as developers now and especially in the future. Now, I feel like I've saved this one to show you as I am really fond of the data attribute, and I want to talk to you about how you can make custom-ish attributes. To give us flexibility, HTML5 allows us to store extra information on standard HTML elements using the data attribute. The syntax for it looks like this. We can of course have data, or we can have data dash and put in whatever word we want to make a custom attribute. Now, why would we want this? Well, we can have a div that's styled like a card. So here we go. Here is my div styled like a card. Okay, so I can't wait to show you how to style stuff in the CSS part of this course, but for now, just stick with me. Now, say I want to flip this card and display some text such as a question and two possible answers. We can actually store that information on the div itself without actually visually seeing it. We would do so like this. So we can have data question, data option 1, or data option 2. So now that information is stored on the div, but we can't see it with our eyes on the div. So for example, we can store a data question attribute that says what color are the carrots. Okay, we can also store another attribute. So let's have data dash option 1, which will give us an option of, let's say, blue. And then we can also have data option 2 that will give us a second option as well that we are storing on that element. Let's go with orange. So that's a lot of information. That's custom information that I am essentially putting on an element. Now, with the magic of JavaScript, we can then get these attributes and show them in the div on the click of the element. But we will leave that magic for when the time is right. Now, it is also worth noting that this information is not fully secret and is still on the client. We just can't see it visually. However, if we inspect the browser like we just learned and look at the HTML document that makes it up, we can see that information here. If you really want something to be hidden, you would have to store it on a server and retrieve it when you need. In this section, I'm going to talk to you about how you can add little notes in your code that won't affect anything in the browser. But why do this? Well, as developers, we might want to annotate things we have done, things we need to do, or simply leave notes for another developer that comes along in the form of an explainer or to-do action item. For beginners, I would strongly recommend annotating, or in other words, adding pseudocode as often as possible. All you need to do is make sure the text you want to add is in between these. You can add this manually, or in VS Code, you can highlight the text and press Command /. So for example, here we have some code. If I wanted to add a reminder on the form that I want to add another input, I could simply write some text that says to do, and then I would comment it out by highlighting the code and pressing Command / on VS Code. So that's what I've done, or you can manually add the characters you see at the beginning and end of this line. Another thing you can do, as mentioned, is put reminders. So add code to yourself. So for example, here I'm going to put remember. The pattern can take regex. Google this later. So this is great for, as a beginner, you can leave yourself little notes about what certain parts of code does, or little reminders about what we learned in that lesson. So once again, to comment this out, just highlight it all and press Command / on VS Code. And finally, we can also add little reminders to other developers too. So for example, if you're sharing this code base with someone and you think they might not know the intention of some code that you put, you could leave them a note. So for example, I have put this input will trigger the action on the form when provided. Because of course, we have not provided an action on this form, but at least this lets someone know that we have thought about it. Okay, great. So there we go. Hopefully this was useful. That is how you can comment out code so that it's not visible in the browser. And that's it for the HTML section. Let's recap what we have learned. So we learned what exactly HTML is, or hypertext markup language, and how we can use it. We also learned how to create our first HTML page using the correct anatomy and use it to create a recipe page together using popular text elements. We then learned about how to navigate between pages or two different things altogether, as well as about semantic sectioning in elements. We also learned about the versatile div, which is essentially a great shell to create anything, and use our knowledge to create a table tennis leaderboard. After that, we looked at forms and input options, as well as how to create our own custom-ish attributes. Phew! So we learned a lot. Now, where to go next? Well, I would really strongly recommend going over everything we have learned so far and try build out another recipe page. Okay, so this time perhaps a different recipe than the one we previously did, and add it to your portfolio. Next, I would try build a Wikipedia page clone. So similar to the format of the table tennis leaderboard, I would like you to use your knowledge of everything you've learned so far in order to build a Wikipedia page. Next, I would also like you to try practice your Googling. We did a little bit of practicing Googling so far in this tutorial, but you're going to be needing it a lot more as you progress as a developer. In CSS especially, there are many properties and attributes that exist, so being able to Google them correctly is definitely a skill that we should acquire. If you have time, I would also suggest looking at the remaining HTML elements that we did not look at in this course. As mentioned at the beginning, there are over 100. So please take some time here if you want to familiarize yourself with the ones that we did not cover. I do think most are pretty self-explanatory, so if you don't want to do this, don't worry. Next, I would suggest also playing around the inspector that we are now acquainted with. Please go ahead and search random pages on the internet and inspect them using the tool, seeing what they have under the hood. And finally, let's get ready for some CSS. This part is going to be great as we're actually going to learn how to make stuff look pretty in our browsers. So, see you there.